Good evening, everybody, and welcome to One Soul Radio. We are the interactive show that is grounded in psychology, inspired by spirit, and we are here to build a spiritual community for you, with you, by you. My name is Cali Alpert. I'm in New York State, a little north of New York City, here with my dear friend and co-host, Steve Hasenberg, who is in
Pacific Palisades on a very hot day, far from the fire volcanoes in Northern California.
Thank goodness you're safe.
Right?
And may everybody else be safe in the higher regions of California right now.
Right.
So the question tonight is, how often do you use the word karma? Do you think about the word karma? A lot of people bandy the word karma about, talking about somebody has good karma, somebody has bad karma. Sometimes you think it's the result of something that you might have done in a previous life, or you look at people that have charm lives and you say, oh, they must have really been well behaved in their last life to earn this sort of merit in
I've
this
always
current
done that.
life.
I've always done that.
You've always done what?
Looked at people and going, they must have a lot of good merit from past lifetimes.
Yeah. So we relate to this topic.
I do.
That's a good start when you and I relate to the topic that we're putting forth to our people. So what if we told you, dear listeners, that there is a whole other way to look at your karma and a way to make friends with your storylines and the narratives that you come into this lifetime with that sometimes you feel might be a little too persistent or might get in your way? That karma is maybe not about earning gold stars, but could perhaps be more about learning about yourself, your higher self, and valuable lessons that you can acquire in this lifetime, right?
Absolutely. We had a lot of fun putting this particular episode together.
We did. It came very naturally.
It did, because we kept thinking about our own karma, which was very plentiful. And we actually came up with a new way of looking at karma, which is much more positive, which we're going to talk about today.
Right. Well, why don't we start with the conventional definition of karma?
Karma is very conventional.
I know that's how the layman sees it. Yes.
An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Mm-hmm.
So if you do good deeds come back.
Yeah.
And if you do bad deeds come back.
Right.
Or you could say, from biblical terms, you reap what you sow.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain beauty. To that, and there's a certain truth to it, but it's not the whole truth.
So let's talk about what our version of the whole truth is. Because, I mean, obviously that was founded on very deep ancient wisdoms and traditions and history.
Right.
So it's not like it's completely random. There's got to be some foundation that you're way more equipped to talk about than I am.
Well, you think I am.
Well, I'm taking a wild stab that you may be better equipped.
Well, I think what you want to do is start looking at the fact that karma is an instrument of the soul.
Yeah.
So the consequences, you could say consequences, or you might be better off by saying circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
The circumstances that occur in your life are soul driven, whether they appear to us as good or bad. Human beings are very fond of pleasure.
We are. I seek it as often as possible.
It's very opposed to pain.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So we don't like things that are overly challenging. But those things that are overly challenging are often the very things we need to grow.
Right.
And so now we're looking at karma as a growth experience, as an opportunity. Even though it can be dangerous, it is an opportunity for personal growth and soul growth both.
So let's talk a little bit about that because again, I think I'm just even thinking of how I first came to even know this word. I'm not sure that I remember the first time I was even around it. And again, people use it in mainstream society, like you say, more in sort of the merit system. You know, if you're born as a celebrity with riches and opportunity and all the freedoms and joys and pleasures of the world, you must have really done right by a higher power in your previous life. So we've already established that that's one way to look at it, but not necessarily the full picture. And where you're going, and the way you and I have talked about this, is that it's to take it to a much deeper place is to really face it head on and to look at ways to learn it, make friends with it, and embrace it.
Right.
Right?
Like we do with everything.
Yeah.
The less
Well,
the less we resist, the better off
mhm,
we are,
mhm,
right?
yeah.
Because the truth is, resistance, as they say in Star Trek, is futile.
Your favorite show?
One of my favorite shows. So resistance is rather futile. There's a truth to that in regards to circumstances that come up. Our reaction to the circumstance is not futile. And so our reaction to whatever karma is coming up is very, very important to our growth.
So this was, you and I have had this conversation a lot as recently as last night, where I actually, you imbued some of your wisdom and, again, upon me, and I wrote down, I took copious notes. I think there's different ways for the benefit of our listeners tonight. It feels like it might be helpful to identify what we mean by karma in the context of what we're talking about, right? So we're talking mostly about the storylines, the narratives that we show up with from previous lives that are, I don't know if persistent is the right word, but very ever present for long periods of time in our current lifetime.
Right.
The things that aren't fleeting, the ones that seem to really be deeply, almost indelibly embedded in our behavior, repeated patterns, repeated thoughts, repeated situations where there's patterns that that loop and loop and loop and loop and loop.
I think
Right?
that would be one of the ways we talk about karma. But the other way certainly is when experiences of intensity happen.
Mm-hmm.
So an automobile crash, a cancer, an
Mm-hmm.
illness, um, any particular unwanted event, we usually say, "Oh my God,
Right.
where's my karma?"
Right. And
I said
also,
it.
you have.
Yes. Oh my God, what is my karma?
I'm so relieved to hear that you've even questioned it. It just makes me feel better about myself. Um, the other way, just to sort of establish the list of everything that we're encompassing
Sure.
during this conversation would be, I was just thinking about this before we came on tonight, would be relationships,
Right.
situations,
Right.
the way you meet people.
Right.
We believe that there's a karmic piece to us meeting each other and the
Absolutely.
very intense familiarity that we've had in a very short period of time, and
Right.
how we feel about lots of people in our lives when you feel like you've found your people again, or you find friendships or partnerships or whatever dynamic, or even work relationships, whatever dynamic it might be, and you feel like there's some sense of karma that brought you to meeting up again, right? That's another version?
Another version and an important one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So often that's how, when we talk about soulmates, when we talk about
Right.
mom and dad are karma, sometimes good karma, sometimes bad karma. My sister was bad karma for me for a long time. My daughter's good karma. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so karma is really the kind of subtle cosmic central casting that is created in order to create a ongoing life for you. And it's filled with karma, it's filled with circumstance, it's filled with events. And all of those events are woven with soul intention and woven with human intention. And what we're going to talk about today is how they serve us rather than how they pull and how they might become, or we might think of them as negative.
So if you're just joining us, welcome to One Soul Radio. We are the interactive show that is grounded in psychology, inspired by spirit, working to build a spiritual community for all of you listeners in a time when and an age where we really, really need each other more than we ever have before. We're talking about karma, and we're talking about the ways that, we can potentially reframe our perspective on karma. And a little bit later, we're going to be talking about some action steps that you all can take to learn more about your karmic lessons and to really recognize day to day how your karmic storylines or lessons are showing up and how to put them to good use, right? So we've kind of identified different versions of karma and just how we're using that word, tonight. And then I think our next step would probably be to talk about the reframe and why, you've said that karma is an opportunity to learn, that it's a gift. You use the words gift of initiation, which I thought was really beautiful, and an opportunity to navigate our lives versus deem it punishment. And I'm going to call you out just playfully for a minute.
Are you really?
Yeah, I am. May I?
Yes, you may.
This is just a semantics thing, but even just now when you were naming like your sister as a storyline, somebody that you had for a time a challenging relationship with, but you qualified it as bad karma versus good karma.
I did that for the sake of our show.
Right. I know that, and you're making it relatable for everybody because that's common vernacular around all this. I also know that what you really the way you view it and the direction that we're walking toward in this conversation is that the first step is really not to put a judgment on the things that are coming to us and happening to us, right? But to start recognizing them through a different lens, to look at them as an opportunity and to look at them as not necessarily good or bad. This podcast and radio show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor, psychologist, or otherwise qualified medical professional. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or professional advice services. If you need help, please seek out a qualified practitioner.